Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. WeatherBrains fans, welcome to the new year. It's 2023. WeatherBrains episode number 885 for the 2nd of January. Magical part of the program, the pre-show, we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time, we say outrageous things. So you're getting back in the saddle here after a week away from things last week, but we've already got people waiting to get in here. So let's let them in because maybe they want to say some outrageous things. But I've got to get the embed code linked up here so we can get this thing on television. And then I'll be done with all of the logistical stuff. All right. Embed code is up and loaded and done. All right. We have Bill and we have Elise.
Hello, Elise.
Hello, Bill and James. How are you guys?
It's good to see you again.
Oh, it's good to see you too.
Oh, it is not. She just made that up. She tolerates us.
I think she was sincere, James.
She's still hurt after that situation in Oklahoma years ago. I'm embarrassed.
That was just two buffoons that we
I
lied
think
to
you're
the
more
WeatherBrains show.
embarrassed about it, James.
I'm very, very, very embarrassed. So look at the radar lighting up here. This is
Wow.
pretty impressive little storm that's approaching the western side of Monroe, Louisiana.
I know. I got one of my team members lives just north of downtown. We have a hotel in Ruston, so the first tornado went just east of it. And the second one,
for me, Monroe represents the halfway point between Birmingham and Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
I used to drive that road a lot. I mean, a lot. And we would stop at Pecanland Mall in Monroe, Louisiana, and celebrate the fact that we were halfway to where we're going. But this was many, many moons ago. So don't know if James A. will be able to join us this evening because of that. But anyway, so we're back in the saddle again after a little downtime. We did not produce a live show last week. We did last week's show right before Christmas. And I actually got, Monday, a week ago today, was this little mini snowmageddon in Huntsville. It was bad. It was really bad. And the forecast was okay, but the impact forecast was horrible. And I've said this over and over, but really all that matters is how weather impacts people. And so, again, it's a lesson to be learned, but we had many, many people trapped in really bad places Monday night. So I spent 8 hours working that event. And we ought to talk about that one sometime. It's a really interesting event. And it was over Christmas, and a lot of people didn't know that it happened, but it was happening and it was bad. Carl, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Loud and clear. 5x9.
Perfect. Thank you.
And we'll get for those that are watching on the YouTube, the replay, just move the slider over about 5 minutes. That'll be the actual start of the show. But you never know what you might miss on the pre-show. There are some people that actually watch the pre-show and they turn it off when we hit the main show. So hoping that we'll say something really, really, really outrageous here. So I was interviewed by two professors this morning about my use of TikTok.
Uh-oh.
And I told those nice ladies, ma'am, I don't know anything about this. I'm not a hipster. I mean, my middle name is Square. You look up Square in the dictionary, and that's me. But I did a 50-minute interview about my use of TikTok today. And I told those ladies that, what I found when I turned that thing on now, Elise and Carl, they're probably TikTok hipsters. They
Absolutely not.
I don't have a TikTok.
Well, that speaks volumes of your intelligence, because TikTok can be an ocean of ignorance. fact, sometimes I think my IQ drops 10 points when I get over there every time. But when you turn on TikTok, it's one of really four things now. I've noticed a fourth that's been creeping in. It's either people dancing, which is fine, or people that are funny, which is fine. We need to laugh more. People that are cussing. And I'm just not a cusser guy. And look, I know all the words. I work in a TV station. When you work in a TV station, you learn all the words. But they're cussing, or there's ladies that are scantily clad, that they're like half naked. And so that's all I see when I turn on the TikTok. And I feel like I don't fit in here. I mean, but having said that, you reach young people on TikTok. And so that's the reason I'm there. And I don't even know what that's all I know about TikTok. I just told you here that how we did a 50-minute interview. I don't know. So anyway,
Were they concerned about the national security aspects, or just
no, they're
how
like,
to use it, or what?
They're trying to review media and how it's changing and how people consume news and weather and how, I don't exactly know the end game of their research, but and I know a lot more about the other ones. But the truth is, and I told them, man, my first major in college was electrical engineering, and I finished in meteorology. And of course, all this stuff didn't exist when I was in school 100 years ago. And so I'm feeling my way in the dark. But I think some of the important part of it is establishing a relationship with the people that you serve, engaging with them. And that's, you got to do it across all these different platforms. But anyway, I'm surprised they didn't hang up on me. Bill, are you on TikTok?
Nope. My kids are, but I'm not.
Why not? Why not?
No time, James.
You're a hipster. Well, I got no time. I'm the Southeastern distributor of Busy.
That's true. I think you're the world distributor of that.
I don't know. I think Carl might have you beat up here in the Northeast and in Buffalo.
Okay. I'm the Southeastern distributor. But I mean, it's like some of these, like the engagement is just incredible on this platform. I mean, it's like before the Arctic thing, that video has 302.6 thousand views. I don't even try. I don't even try over here. That's fascinating to me. But anyway, this is not TikTok brains. This is WeatherBrains. And there are some weather people that are on there. And I told them, if you're in a market where there's no critical weather, fine, dance, take your clothes off, cuss, drop your drawers in the Arby's, whatever you want to do. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. But when you're in a market where you've got weather that can kill you, you've got to have credibility. And I just don't know if dancing and taking your clothes off and dropping F-bombs every 5 minutes, and it's not working for me in this market. It might work in San Diego. That's great. Los Angeles. That's great. But it's just, anyway, I'm not going to get cranky about TikTok. Welcome to our television viewers. It is top of the hour. We're about to get the show started here. And we are back on our live schedule here. So let's get this going. Bill, are we ready to go here?
I think so.
Bill,
Dr. Simpson, can you hear us okay?
Sure can. I didn't know Carl was going to be here. Hey, Carl.
I actually had Dr. Simpson as an instructor for operations in my MBA program. So it's funny that we meet virtually in a podcast room.
Maybe you get some course credit, Carl.
Wow. We'll dig us some good dirt on Carl here. All right.
Or
so
vice
I know
versa.
there you go. It works both ways. So I know that Neil is traveling to AMS and Kim is going to be a few minutes late, but I think we're good to go here. So let's get this thing started. We'll do track 1, track 2, and here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band. The AMS Weather Band is a global community of weather enthusiasts dedicated to learning and sharing their love of science. Visit amsweatherband.org to learn more. and join the band today.
WeatherBrains episode number 885, the weekly show that's all about weather. This is for the new year, the 2nd of January, 2023. And because this is January, we're coming up on the anniversary of this show. WeatherBrains will celebrate its 17th anniversary at the end of this month. How insane is that, Troy? 17 years of this.
You don't look a day over 15.
Yeah. What's funny, the show originally was, and we were doing podcasting before people even knew what it was for years, but it was a 30-minute audio show, very tightly produced. I mean, David Black was the host, and he really worked hard. The production values were incredible. And but it was 30 minutes, and somehow it's gone to this 2-hour monstrosity with bad production value and me punching the buttons here. It's gone totally right down the tubes, but it's been a great 17-year run. And it looks like Troy, you might be the only of the regulars here. We've got a lot of our people that are traveling.
Yeah.
And for a lot of folks, it is a holiday. We've got AMS coming up. So Bill Murray, let me just go right to you and let's get this thing started. Let's bring in our guests before they hang up on us.
Yeah, Rick Smith's hiding down there. Is
Rick here? Rick, did you slip in the door? Rick.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rick Smith. I don't know if you remember me, but
It's been last
tags on here, Rick.
It was last year.
it's been all the way.
And we should assume, Rick, that James A is busy with weather in his Tulsa market, right?
Yeah, they've got tornado warnings in eastern Oklahoma, just east of here. So we didn't. Part of our CWA was in a tornado watch, but we didn't have any, not like James A is having over there. So hopefully that'll move out of his area, and he said he may be in a little bit later, so we can hope for that. So
his email, Rick, his email just said, "Dumb weather. I'll be late."
Dumb weather. Pesky weather.
Yes. So hopefully we'll get James A on here in just a bit. And Kim said she might be running a smidgen late too. So Bill, let's bring in our guest. Let's start this party.
Yeah, James, tonight's show is the suggestion of honorary guest booking officer Jay Farlow. He suggested our first guest, WeatherBrain, who he says he had the pleasure of meeting at Valparaiso University. All of our two of our guest WeatherBrains tonight are meteorologists at WGRC NBC2 in Buffalo. And number one is no stranger to the show, having been hazed by our dear leader Span at the National Weather Association annual meeting several years ago. Lee Smith, we're glad you came back anyway. How you doing?
Wait. Now, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I was being well behaved in my corner, and you put me with Dr. Doswell over there. Okay. And he tends to drag me into the abyss of misbehavior. And so I'm just saying Chuck started it. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, we're going to put you both in timeout and then go from there. But Elise wouldn't come on the show without her colleague at WGRC who was on with her. She was before the storm. He was after the storm. He's a lifelong Western New Yorker, and he is made of snow. His own words. Carl Lamb, welcome to the show. I guess we'll never have you in Miami, huh?
Probably not. I think I would melt once I touch down in Miami.
Well, we're awfully glad you're here. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're looking forward to hearing from you. And Jay also suggested our final WeatherBrain tonight, expert on emergency services and disaster response at the University of Buffalo. Dr. Natalie Simpson, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Well, glad you could join us. That's just awesome. And
James, by the way, Bill, but before we start, we have to get an update on poor old James A. He sent this in. This is what he's doing right now. So, and for those that don't know, James Adelot is a meteorologist on television in Tulsa, and he is busy with thunderstorms, and he just said dumb weather.
Yeah.
So there you go.
One thing that while we're talking about that for a second, while we look at James, and who wouldn't want to sit and watch James all day long like that?
Exactly.
But I did get a text message just a few minutes ago from Kevin Claisel up at OU, and that prior Oklahoma Mesonet station may have been a close hit here in the last 30 minutes from that tornado. That's what we're understanding. It's, as he says, he's hypothesizing that based on the data that they're seeing, but that prior Oklahoma Mesonet site, that we'll have to talk to James about that when we get him on here in just a bit, but just thought I'd pass that along.
You know, if you live near one of those mesonet stations in Oklahoma, I think I'd be selling my house. And of course, that may just be about all of Oklahoma, Rick, and apparently all of northern Louisiana and southern Arkansas too. It's no fun, sure, for sure. But at least you grew up in Chicagoland, right? And if Span had been successful in eliminating all the tornado sirens, you might not have been a weather person today. Is that true?
Potentially. I grew up next to a tornado siren. It was about 50 to 100 yards away from my swing set. So I guess just me being the very curious little child I was, that blaring once a month into my bedroom didn't scare me. It actually made me curious as to what it was warning about, who knew why it would go off. And that's when my mom actually introduced me to the job of a meteorologist by turning on local television stations in Chicago.
Well, at least, you know, we always hear James's side of the story from Norman. I don't know if we've ever really heard your side of the story like we should have. And so apparently it's affected James a lot more than it has you. You've obviously ended up in a really prime job where you are, but take us back to that night and help us remember it a little bit. Was it as traumatic as James envisions it?
And I don't think so. I think I'm a little far removed from that now. I've definitely moved on in my career. But yes, it was at the National Weather Association annual meeting in Norman. I think 2015. I went there because Valparaiso University student chapter of the AMS and NWA won local chapter of the year with the National Weather Association. I was vice president at the time. So I went there as a junior in college at Valparaiso University for the award and to just get to kind of my first big weather conference. But also I was looking for an internship and looking to make connections and network my way to hopefully what would be a good internship that following summer heading into my senior year. And my friend and colleague, and who was also a student at the time, Lynette Grant, who is now a meteorologist in South Bend, Indiana, we went to the live taping of WeatherBrains, and I remember they were looking for students. There we are. Oh, look
yes.
at us. Bill, there you are. But they were looking for students to come on the show and talk about their experience. And right before we went on the show, there was kind of this monologue about how students don't work hard, the television industry is dying, and it was a bunch of doom and gloom. And then you bring these two smart, intelligent young women who want to go into TV and are working really hard to get jobs and internships on immediately after. So it was a little intimidating, but at the time I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. So maybe that was a good thing at the time. But that's actually where that was my first interaction with James. And then the fun part of the story is, you know, a couple months later, I show up for his internship that summer.
Yeah, I kept looking at her and thinking, I know her from somewhere. I know her from somewhere. And when I realized who it was, I was absolutely petrified, just petrified. But for those that, and again, most people listen, but for those that are watching, these are screen grabs. And my pick of the week, it's going to be the actual, you know, video replay of this show. But we were down at the basement at the National Weather Center. And what is Brian Peters? Brian Peters looks like a game show host up there. You know, Brian is in the middle of all of us. And
yeah,
they put
he's
me
a Pat Sajak for some reason. I didn't remember he was I guess he owned the equipment, so we let him run the show.
And so down on the, you know, this one side, you got Nate, who's, you know, intelligent and under control. And then you got me and Chuck down there. And that's just when it went down the tubes. You got to keep us separated. You got to keep us separated. So anyway, that was a magical moment on WeatherBrains.
Yes, it was, and we're glad that you overcame it, at least. And obviously, what market is Buffalo, guys? What in terms of TV markets?
I believe it's 51, 52, Carl. If I'm 53.
I think it slid a little. We're behind Fresno now. Can find the number, but.
Yeah, but I got my start at Jefferson City, Missouri, which was, I think, market 130, 131, and then was able to jump here to Buffalo. So from tornadoes to lake effect snow is kind of how my career has progressed over the past 5 years.
Yeah, well, it's been a heck of a year for snow there, obviously, and Buffalo being no stranger to major lake effect snow events. I think I have more stories about Buffalo in my weather history records over time. I mean, you can get some really amazing snowfalls there. Talk about some of the ones that you measure things by. I mean, I always think about the 1977 blizzard, I think, as one of the benchmarks. What are the other benchmarks before this year?
Winter storm knife. Sorry, Carl, that's actually his area, but I had to dig out of that one. So.
I had to dig right out of that one too. That was in 2014, and so Natalie and I are in the Southtown, so really kind of in the prime area where lake effect snow really develops. And that storm in 2014, you just knew that it was going to be bad, but you didn't know how bad it was going to be. And I mean, chime in whenever, because this was, I mean, that was just relentless in terms of how much snow fell, but that was over the course of 4.5 days.
Most of it was inside of 2 days, right? From what I remember.
Well, the cleanup sure felt like 4.5 days because I couldn't leave my house until the Saturday morning after. But it was just incredible that we had about 6.5 feet of snow here in Hamburg. I don't know what you had, Natalie, out where you were.
A little bit less than that, but we had pretty much, we were in the same line, you know, because they're in such tight focused bands. In my house, they're pretty much in that same line. Yeah, it felt like something out of Stephen King. I honestly was getting a little panic stricken. I thought it was never going to stop snowing.
That's true. Oh my
We're
God.
just going to be buried.
Did it have the same sort of extreme winds that this
No.
last storm had?
It was a very different kind of storm. You know, that's one of the things that is so striking about this blizzard is how unlucky it is. That storm was ridiculously extreme, but it was nothing like this because it didn't have the winds at all. So it just had this strange, sinister sense that it would never stop snowing, but you could get out and wait around in it and shovel. It wasn't hugely cold either, was it, Carl?
No, it was not. It was not hugely cold, but that was one of those types of snows where you easily saw your car vanish.
Yeah, just vanish.
In the
I
driveway.
walked up onto my roof. There was so much snow.
Yeah, it was the type of snow that you think, how does this happen?
How does this happen?
And why does it keep happening here? Yeah.
You know, it's always been one of those weather bucket list things for me, you know, to get to see that. But, you know, we had, you know, we've talked about the event that occurred, you know, in November, and we, you know, talked to Mark Sudduth, who was up there chasing it during the time. And, you know, it seems like it's so life threatening though to me. And this event obviously, you know, turned out to be that. In a very grave and tragic way. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. But, you know, I hear people from California who say, you know, they're scared to death of tornadoes and they'll take earthquakes all day long. And, you know, here I would take tornadoes over an earthquake. And, you know, but the snow scares me about as bad as anything. It's like James was saying in the pre-show. You know, we had a little tiny snow in, you know, North Alabama last week, and it, you know, turned into a big high impact event. Nothing like this, but at least take us back, you know, to the synoptic setup and what caused this storm to be so bad.
Yeah, well, I think there were a couple of different, we obviously knew going into this event, that this was going to be a massive winter storm that not only impacted Buffalo, but impacted so much of the country at the worst possible time, which was just before Christmas. So in a way, it kind of already felt like a losing battle because you had the distraction of everyone getting ready for the holiday weekend while you were trying to warn of what could be a significant weather event. And also something important for me as a science communicator is knowing your audience. And you're talking to a Buffalo audience that just got 3 to 7 feet of snow dumped on them a month before. So when you're talking about a major snowstorm to them, they're like, oh, well, we just dealt with, you know, Snowvember 2.0 3 weeks ago. So it was so critical to me to communicate the fact that this was going to be a snowstorm, a windstorm, an ice storm, and an Arctic air outbreak within a matter of 3 days. And that's a lot to process. And it's very, very scary. And it's very nerve-wracking as a communicator too, because you have to walk that line of preparing your community and being honest with what could happen, but not sending them into a panic mode. and scaring them, because you want them to get the critical information that they need. So from the synoptic setup too, this was going to be a major event because of how that area of low pressure was going to move and how quickly it would intensify over Ontario and in Canada. And it turned out to be a bomb cyclone. I know that was a word that was going around a lot leading up to the event, that this system could rapidly intensify as it moved over the Great Lakes. And it did. From 7 p.m. Thursday into 7 p.m. Friday, that system dropped from 101 millibars to 970 in 24 hours. So it did become a bomb cyclone. But moving away from that definition, again, as that local forecaster, as much as that was also kind of a distraction, I needed to tell them, okay, we have this bomb cyclone that's coming. I know that sounds big and scary, but for Western New York, here's what that means. We have this much snow coming. We have these winds that could reach tropical storm force strength gusts, and we have the Arctic old, the potential for a flash freeze. This was, and in the back of my mind, you just knew that this was going to be potentially a once in a generation storm, but taking away the fear from that, so you could really just tell your community, hey, this is going to be big. I know you have travel plans for the holiday weekend. I know that we are a community that usually gets a lot of snow each winter, but this one has the potential to be different. And here's why.
And so how far out were you really hitting the message hard? When did you start talking about this system?
Go ahead, Carl.
I think it was the Thursday before the storm. Our chief
So a
meteorologist,
whole week in advance, right?
yeah, about 8 days in advance.
Wow.
Our chief meteorologist, Patrick Hammer, was saying it looks like there could be a real doozy of a storm on the way. And that was kind of the first hint. And, even when we're doing that, for me especially, there's always this knot in my stomach, right? Being from here, you just don't think it's going to match up with storms of historic proportions. And then once we kind of got towards Friday, I know Elise was monitoring that, and then Saturday into the weekend before, and that's when I was watching. And then I remember going up to our newsroom for our overnight team Monday morning, telling them, look, I haven't said this on the air yet, but on Friday, I don't think a single plane gets to take off from the Buffalo Niagara International Airport because of how strong the winds are going to be. And I told them this too. And, this is one of those things that I think is kind of a little further down the list, but I don't think any de-icing crews can de-ice planes fast enough if there's that type of flash freeze. And that was one of those things I was just in the back of my mind. I was like, this is not good. And this is December 23rd. This is when everyone is in the airport, shoulder to shoulder, and everyone's already in like a touchy mood. They're just like, they want to get to their destination. And, it was just one of those things where I said, I would plan to have someone at the airport on Thursday, and I would plan to have someone at the airport on Friday, knowing well that the impacts were going to be there.
Yeah, and that week before too, Carl, we both were working in tandem covering the lake effect event that was going to impact the Bills game. So we were actively a week in advance communicating an event that would give us 1 to 2 feet of snow. That's a typical lake effect event here. So we were communicating that and how it would impact the Bills game and the travel around that, while also having to look 5-7 days out to this potentially bigger storm that would impact so much of the country, but then also could really make Buffalo the bullseye and see some of the worst impacts here, depending on how it moved and how it evolved.
So take us into the storm now as it began to unfold, and what was happening and how the messaging shifted, and then let's begin to talk about how the message was received.
I guess as we kind of got to, let's say, Thursday night, I think that's when everything really started to kind of bubble up for real. I think the people had been hearing us saying that this was going to be a high impact storm, all the impacts that go along with it, the wind, the cold, just so many things that go along with it. And it was just, it just didn't feel like it was real. And we had people asking, and I had my text messages were like, oh, I have to run a few errands tomorrow morning. What do you think for Friday morning? And I was like, oh my gosh, I was stressed out just reading that, because I was like, this is not what we're typically used to. And that was just one of those things that as it was unfolding, you just had that nervousness, and you were just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to tell you not to go outside, but please don't go outside. And people were texting me with travel plans and asking. My aunt, who was actually going to Rome on Saturday, I told her, I was like, you're not getting out on Saturday, so all of these things started to unfold. And as it happens, it just really took on a whole new kind of level of significance. And then Friday was just, from the moment I woke up, I was like, this smells like trouble. This sounds like trouble. And it feels like trouble too, because the winds were already starting to pick up. I lost power like an hour and 20 minutes into the blizzard warning. A tree had been knocked down on the electrical wires outside my neighborhood. So I was out early, and it was just the start of something really bad, and I just could feel it. But that's one of those things that it's hard to communicate right off the bat.
For me, the turning point was kind of Wednesday. And up to that point, by Wednesday, we had the winter storm warning. We were starting to get kind of all the weather alerts that we had continued throughout the week. But Wednesday, we made an effort to reach out to the National Weather Service office. And our 5:30 newscast that we do is a town hall format where we're able to do some longer form pieces. And it's very much like a town hall. We bring in city officials, community leaders, and are able to ask them questions. But during the town hall, we had a pre-recorded interview with the warning coordination meteorologist here at the National Weather Service office in Buffalo, Michael Fries. And he was speaking with our anchor. And what hit me to my core was our anchor for that show, Michael. He took my forecast from the 4 p.m. show and was able to overlay my graphics to exactly what Michael Fries, who's the WCM, was saying. And I had no idea. I did not see the interview beforehand. We helped kind of get it. Storm Team 2, I'm so thankful for our team. We're the Weather Ready Nation Ambassadors of the Year for the Buffalo office. So that was, helping to cultivate that relationship and also continue it to better warn our community of these big weather events and also feature them when necessary. But that Wednesday afternoon show where he was able to marry my forecast with the National Weather Service forecast, talking about those high impacts of whiteout conditions, potentially blizzard-like conditions, tropical storm force winds. You're not going to be able to travel. Then it's going to be brutally cold. Like all of those things were coming together. And in the fact that they called this, that infamous AFD from Tuesday, that once in a generation storm, and how then Michael Fries was able to pinpoint, looking back in recent history, they weren't able to compare this storm to anything they had seen before. And he said that on air. And I think that's when, for me, my communication quickly changed to be like this, don't get to where you want to be for the holiday weekend Friday and don't move. And that was at the time the way I thought it was kind of best to communicate that without also scaring people, but being very honest about this is potentially a life-threatening situation. And then I know we're also going to get into some of the lessons learned from that as well. But then this is also when I want to really give a shout out to Carl, because we, Bill, as you mentioned, traded places. I was kind of there the week up to the storm. And then I went to Chicago to be with my family for the Christmas weekend. And then Carl was the one who really stepped up for the team. And Carl, you deserve all of the recognition for the work you did during that storm, because you were really the local hero in my eyes with our team being there for everybody. So I did want to put that out there as Carl, I know you're going to be talking more about what happened during the storm throughout this.
Yeah, talk about you and your team, Carl, and what it was like, because this obviously probably is the biggest event you've ever covered, I would suppose.
Oh yeah,
or would it be? Yeah.
This is easily. It's the defining moment so far in this career, but it is the work of all of us, right, to put all these forecasts together. And it was led off by our chief meteorologist, Patrick Hammer, that morning. And it was already busy. Once I got in around 9:30, it was already just bubbling, and that's actually around 9:40 was when we got some of those incredibly strong wind gusts, and the peak wind gust came a little bit later, up to 79 miles per hour in Lackawanna, just south of Buffalo by about, let's say, 5 to 8 miles. And that was, I mean, once that came through, you were like, this is going to go downhill really quickly in terms of the snow, the wind, the cold setting up, the temperatures were dropping. And, from that 10 a.m. hour on, once I got there, it was just kind of this all out plan of what is our attack, for the 11 o'clock show that we do. And after that, it was just kind of this nonstop kind of loop of what needs to be shared and communicated right now. But there was, I would say that there was this type of ease of doing something like this in the newsroom. There was not this type of stress that you normally have in these types of weather events, because I think everyone was just so laser focused on one thing, and you take all the other stress of, having other stories and VOs and SOTs cut, it was just weather, and so we did our 11 o'clock show. I was up on the roof. I was experiencing the conditions firsthand, and you really start to feel the impact when you're like, I don't know how many feet up in the sky we are, from on our building. And you just felt it kind of just cut right through you. Like as that cold just kind of seeps in, that was really kind of the onset of like all the cold that was just pouring into Western New York. And then, when we were doing, an extra hour of news and weather at 1 o'clock, we were taking press conferences. We did a quick kind of update at 3 o'clock. And once we got to the 4 o'clock show, because we have a 4 to 6:30 p.m. block, it was basically, here's as much time as you need, update everybody, right? So, of a half an hour, right, it was 10 minutes of me, and it was just tracking it in every community that you could possibly mention that was under that impact right away, and telling people that this is the storm of a generation, right? I mean, so that was trying to find other ways to say it so that people got it was kind of the primary focus in my mind, because it was just so bad, and I want to, applaud our news director, Jeremy Settle, for not sending out crews, reporters, photographers, driving out in these elements. We were talking with our anchors. They were saying it was like incredible that they had never experienced that before, because typically in these treacherous conditions, right, our crews, our reporters, our photographers, they're out in the elements. They're telling people not to go out in this, and that did not happen. All our photographers were in-house. All our reporters were in-house. The farthest they went to be outside was like 5 or 6 feet outside the studio, or outside the station rather. So, they could have easily come back in within 8 seconds. They were not far. They were not put in harm's way. But, that was incredible too, because I think that helped us communicate the severity that we didn't even want to cross that line. You shouldn't either. And I think that step for us as a news organization, just from the people who have watched it and have lived it, and lived through so many storms, when you hear that type of decision being made, that just, that was really kind of resonant for me. And that really stood out.
Troy, it sounded like one of those Midwestern blizzards where you'd have to tie a rope around yourself before you could go out to check on the cows even, or do anything. It just sounds horrible. But Dr. Simpson, I want to bring you in for a minute. Talk about how this message was received. I mean, 7-8 days of notice had to be one of the, probably best publicized events in that area. In a long time, because I don't imagine you had that kind of warning in 1977. You may have had something pretty close to it in 2014, but this was an unprecedented message.
Yes, it's we should study this, in that we get a lot of messages. And one of the things that strikes me is just so almost sinister about this storm was the fact that we had, as Elise said, November 2.0. Remember, Winter Storm Knife, just a few weeks before. Another outrageous, but nothing like this, just our usual ridiculously heavy lake effect shenanigans. Right. And we even had a Bills game, and we worked our way through that. And so, to a certain extent, that was in my mind, that was a distractor in trying to get the message out to the public. I don't think anything could have been done in terms of messaging from the meteorologists. I can't imagine where you could have slipped in a message. Right, that there would have been one more before it came, but it all starts. I got just somebody, from a member of the public. It all starts to sound. It's okay. Yeah, it's the weather, right? One of the things that strikes me, and I don't mean to derail the conversation, but this is something that's fascinated me. Okay, so I'm not a meteorologist, although I'm an analyst. I model things. And one of the things that's really frustrating to me, since my big passion is emergency response, like responding to large events like this, is that I'm really good at math. I like data and I can build math models. It seems to me that some of the biggest problems that we need to work on to keep people out of harm's way during disasters, it's got to do with language. It's like totally out of my wheelhouse. And speaking of that, I don't think it's my imagination, because I started reading around and I read some commentary on this. It's interesting that we don't even have very precise language. And I'm just talking about the public, right? We don't have very precise language concerning all the things that can go wrong with snow. We don't. We have snow, flurries, people know what that is, or blizzard. I mean, I think we only recently started using the word grapple. At least in our area, because we get a lot of that. And I think that the National Weather Service only recently added snow squalls, right?
We just talked about that a few weeks ago.
Think about it, because this stuff has been around killing people for a long time, right? The lack of visibility, it's like one of the big, I should say, lethal, factors here. And we don't, there's not a lot of strong ways to designate that. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm probably kind of going off on a tangent from what you asked.
Well, we're always interested in, the circumstances that lead to fatalities, because our job is to save lives. As meteorologists, that's what we feel like, especially when it comes to hazardous weather in our location. And that's obviously what Carl and Elise and Patrick and the Weather Service folks and everyone involved, the emergency managers, their job is to save lives. And there's always a lot of finger pointing after an event like this and blaming. If there was anything that could have been done better from the emergency management perspective, what would you say that was? Just an initial hot wash, Dr. Simpson. Anything we could have done better?
Okay, well, we should study disasters in hindsight, but we have to remember that we are studying them in hindsight, right? Somebody had to make decisions in the moment, and we get the privilege of then standing back and saying, well, was that the best thing to do, or could you have done something else?
Right.
Okay, now in the spirit of that, one of the things also that in particular, snow emergencies, okay, see, that's even weak language, but we have them in Buffalo, snow emergencies, right? Snow threats, snow disasters, blizzards. They're a particular class of emergency. I could talk to you about parallels in other types of things that can go wrong, where there's cascading effects. Because even in the discussion that you guys were having earlier, I was hearing you talking about the cascade. It really started to unfold that point. So emergencies that have like a cascading effect is that there'll be something that goes wrong that then triggers a whole series of things. And that what it creates is once the first thing goes wrong, it's almost historically like stepping on a landmine. It seems like it's nonlinear. It seems like that everything, right, went wrong all at once, but actually that was always embedded in there. Okay, and so ideally, as a society and as emergency managers, what you want to do is first off, you want to be aware of the potential cascades, and then you want to fiercely guard the first domino, right? Because that's what triggers it. And so with snow emergencies, it's the first domino is the roads in a certain sense. Okay, because you hear there was a lot of debate about when they closed the roads. I don't think necessarily even people that have a lot of experience with snow, I think we need to own up with this. I think most people miss the point of why we close roads, why we have driving bans. It keeps drivers safe, like they stay in home. It's true. I mean, that's a nice benefit of that, but we close roads to keep them open. Right? If you keep smaller vehicles off the road, your plows can fight the fight in the storm longer. And if you can keep the roads even barely open during the storm, ambulances can respond, utility crews can respond. See, so this storm not only had heavy snow and it stranded vehicles, the big lake effect snowstorms that we were talking about, they did that too. They stranded a bunch of people on the thruway, but they didn't have high winds. And so as we were digging out from that, we weren't also losing our power. And they didn't have this puddle of super cold air so that when people lost power, it went down to single digits in their house very, very quickly, right? The house lost heat. And the utility crews can't respond because now you see how these things it's triggering a cascade of events. The utility crews can't respond then at that point. So now you have another problem, right? You have people, not exactly what Natalie's talking about snow. I think the winter would, what, Rick?
No, I didn't mean to interrupt. You go ahead and finish, and I just have a question about what you were talking about earlier in a second.
Yeah, okay. So it perhaps, one of the things, my big beef with this is that these certain types of emergencies that are preemptive, once the data starts piling up, that something quite potentially lethal is on the way, that we should depersonalize these types of emergencies like driving bans and closing roads, that we should just have a simple rule of thumb that if the conditions are such, the data, an agreed upon source of data at a certain time, we should close the roads. It's not up to a mayor or county executive. And if they're wrong, if the weather wobbles to the south or it doesn't turn out to be as bad as it was, it's not their fault they shut down the economy during the busiest shopping season of the year. It's just the rule at that point. So what were we saying?
Great discussion. Natalie, you mentioned earlier, I thought it was really interesting. You talked about how we don't really have a lot of words to describe snow. We've got snow, we've got flurries on one end, we've got a blizzard on the other, and really not a lot in the middle. The Weather Service has been experimenting with something called the Winter Storm Severity Index, and it's trying to categorize the impacts of winter storms, not just using a snowfall accumulation total, but how much load the snow is going to put on power lines. Is there going to be ice accumulation? Is there a flash freeze? Is there a ground blizzard? Is there blowing snow? Things like that. And I really, for anybody, but Elise and Carl and Natalie, wonder if you guys have used this, look at this. Does this do anything to help? And in my opinion, it's probably not getting out to the public directly. It's kind of a new thing, but I don't know if anybody has experience with that. I'd just be curious to hear what you thought, because it kind of gets to what Natalie's saying a little bit.
Yeah, I love the sound of it, but I have to confess ignorance, because I've often thought, how come everybody knows like a category 4 hurricane? Hurricanes have such street cred, they get names, right? They get marketed like supervillains, but to a certain extent, it gets through to people, right? Ooh, there's a hurricane coming.
Yes, Rick, we have actually used the storm severity index I've used it in forecasts before. I haven't kind of taken a copy paste from it, but I've done, because you have the areas from yellow to orange to red to purple. And the purple area is the life-threatening impacts, life-saving measures might need to be taken because of the snow, whether it's the weight, the amount, the timing, the wind, etc. And we've used that kind of in a way to just highlight areas that are going to be the most impacted by this storm. We used it with the first lake effect event that we had in November before Thanksgiving, and that's where we kind of introduced it. We did, again, in our kind of 5:30 segment, a town hall actually about describing the storm severity index, because that was popping up on social media a lot. And then we used it again ahead of this storm. And what was very eerie was that they looked very similar, but we knew that they were going to be two completely different storms by nature. So then again, you had to kind of fight that battle of, okay, well, we're going to get 3 to 7 feet of snow with this storm. It's the amount of snow, how quickly it's going to fall over a prolonged period of time. Yes, we got 51.4 inches of snow at the Buffalo airport in this blizzard, but the impacts of this, I don't want to say wasn't necessarily how much snow we were going to get, but how quickly it was going to fall, the high winds that were going to blow it around and create snow drifts, and then the brutally cold temperatures that also followed and came with the event as well.
I think
At
just
least,
from
real quick question for Natalie and Elise and for Carl. Okay, so what on the second day of January when we're taping this, what is our death toll now in Buffalo? Let's talk about that first, and I'm going to get back to something Natalie said here a second ago. But what's the latest y'all hear?
I think it's still 40 for the storm as a whole. Was there an update?
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's for the whole region. A subset of that is in Buffalo.
Right. Well, that's not sustainable. Number one, it's just not. It's not sustainable. We'll need to have answers. And Natalie, you mentioned that the hurricanes or tropical cyclones have street cred and people knew what to do. Well, I would argue with you a little bit. In Ian, they didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you this, Rick, quick question for you. Will this trigger a National Weather Service assessment?
That's several levels above my pay grade, but
Okay, I just wondered
wouldn't be
what your
surprised. I mean, it's certainly
Okay.
to me at least a regional service assessment. Eastern region may, at the very least, I would think Eastern region would do that, because this is like Natalie said, Elise, Carl, everybody said, we need to study this event. We need to learn from it. That's one of the ways to do it. I can't imagine the service being any better, but yeah, to me, if you don't do a service assessment for this, then why do them, you know?
Well, no, and I'm back with Natalie to some degree. This is all messaging. Ian was messaging. That's what it comes down to. It's messaging. It is something that our friend Kim, studies there in Norman at OU and looks at all that.
So Troy, to your point here, just kind of looking back and debriefing this event, being able to watch it unfold in kind of a unique fashion, being able to prepare and then seeing it occur and keeping updated with it from afar. I think something that we can't overlook in this is saying how having an accurate forecast is so important. It's vital. But to your point, we need to make sure that this accurate forecast is received in a way that we can help all communities and all peoples prepare. And this goes back to James, when you took me for my final exam in Birmingham to that Walmart where I had to interact.
This is for real? He really does this? Elise?
He does this. Yeah. He writes about it in his book.
Oh my goodness. I thought he just made it up on the show.
No, he does this because this as a communicator is you need to be able to talk to people who don't look like you, who don't come from the same background as you, and try to help them prepare for an event. And I think that's something that we need to take with us and figure out for future storms like this, because if we're not able to help people prepare before the event to keep them safe, that's where we're going to continue to see loss of life. We need to understand what their needs are before a storm, so we can help mitigate the loss of life and property.
And that at least is what scares the hell out of me about this, is we had an accurate forecast. The forecasters at Buffalo should get the prize. I mean, they put out a great forecast, but guess what? We still lost 40 people.
Yeah.
And I don't assume that number's etched in concrete yet. I think that may go higher. But you know,
Mhm.
it's all that messaging stuff, and it just worries me that with such, and I think you said it really well, Elise. It was a very accurate forecast.
So,
And
so
we're
here's my
so-
question: how do people in Buffalo get weather information? Every market's
Yeah,
different.
yeah.
I can tell you about my market, but I do believe it is a trend nationally that fewer and fewer and fewer people are watching local television news. They have news fatigue. They're sick of this right wing, left wing fighting and it's fear porn, and they're just tired of hearing it and watching it. And they watch Netflix and they watch Hulu and they watch Amazon Prime. They don't watch local television. You know, we're live, local, and late breaking, the Weather Authority, but they don't watch it. So how do people in Buffalo get their information? That's the next question for any of you. Apparently some folks didn't get the word.
Yeah, I will say that Buffalo is an odd TV market, having grown up here my entire life. People really love watching the news here. They watch it all the time. I mean, it is still a very dominant way to get information out to a local audience. And I think that is an anomaly, I would say, based on, the conversations that we have with many of our colleagues, right? That it's not the same everywhere else. So, I think that in and of itself is a rarity, but we know that there's a significant part of the audience that is watching our station or the other stations in town to get their information. But I still think that this is the professional weight on me, and I don't want to speak for others, but it is the challenge of how do we communicate this in a different way? Do I need to develop a way to communicate in different languages with the types of impacts that will resonate with our large refugee population, right? Who do we work with to do that, right? Who do we work with to communicate with people who just, think that they've experienced something like this before? Because I'll tell you very honestly, when we had that lake effect snow in November of 2022, I was like, it's another one. I didn't expect to get stuck twice and get pulled out by a tractor the second time, right? But I mean, we've been through this, right? So the messaging is in the language. It really has to be investigated, right? And so it really just requires poring over what is the best combination of language to reach those people who may have that hardened kind of Buffalo kind of willpower to deal with these types of storms, right? And I think that is something that we, I'm going to only speak for myself. I have to work on, because I'm from here, and I probably have that shell, because when people say there's a foot or 2 feet of snow, I'm like, oh, okay. It's like other people who deal with other types of severe weather, that you're well equipped for it. You know exactly what to do. You have a shovel in your car, you have food, you have a candle, you have a lighter, you have a blanket. I mean, I could camp out, in a regular storm and likely be okay, but not in that type of storm that just rolled through.
Well, I realize there are all sorts of layers of vulnerability, and Dr. Kim Coco McLean joins us right at the exact perfect moment, Kim, because we've gone through, analyzing this blizzard and the social disaster that it kind of became, and we're focusing on that response, because the forecast couldn't have been much better. 8 days out, hard hitting, impacts, should be everybody's on the same page, but still we lose 40 people. And you begin to see all these vulnerabilities, you expose all these vulnerabilities. I realized that, for me, it's nothing to go fill my car all the way to to full. But, I see people that are at the gas station putting $5 in their car. That's not going to last very long when you're in a snowdrift for 24 hours. So talk about the circumstances of the fatalities for a minute. How did people lose their lives in this? Because I see all kinds of stories. I corresponded with the WCM at the Weather Service there, and he couldn't join us tonight. But one of the things he said was there are all kinds of great stories too. I read about the guy this morning who went and broke into a school, and saved probably a dozen people's lives. And then, wrote a note saying, "Hey, I'm sorry I had to break out a window," and said Happy New Year. It's like this guy was like a hero. And those stories, where people adapt and become, rise to the occasion, they're probably everywhere. But talk about the vulnerabilities exposed and the circumstances of the fatalities. So we can get at that. How can we message better to those people who might find themselves in those situations?
Right. And Natalie is providing this in the chat. And, yes, so a number of people died outside, and a number of people died in their cars. But I think the thing that was most striking and the most personally devastating was when we got the reports of people unable to get emergency medical care because first responders could not get to them because of impassable roads. I mean, we're talking about Friday. I mean, you couldn't even see your hand in front of you. I mean, it was just that bad,
And it's not like a hurricane where they made the decision to stay in a vulnerable place. You couldn't move, the whole city of Buffalo out.
Correct. So, and people dying of cold in their homes because of a lack of power, no heat. It was, and people also dying of cardiac events, people dying while shoveling, and so those all told all together, those are 5 different ways that people have to attack this problem, right? Those are 5 very different scenarios and 5 very different kind of problems that need 5 very different types of solutions.
Well, actually, the ones I put in the chat, Carl, are the ones that are all related to keeping the roads open. Because the 17 people that were found out in the open, they were presumably either leaving their stranded cars or they couldn't use their car and they very much felt they needed to go somewhere and they were struggling on foot. The 3 people died waiting for an ambulance. 11 people died in their homes because of the loss of power. See the cascading problem here? It was the winds, not the snow. The winds and the super cold that killed them. In that, not to be morbid. But I also wanted to say it is not surprising that Buffalo is an unusual community in that it does listen to its local news because we have Carl and Elise. I mean, who wouldn't?
And I appreciate Natalie and Elise and Carl the fact y'all mentioned it, that you didn't feel like that the Buffalo media ever got the point where they were where it appeared that they were getting panicky, which doesn't help at home. I hope Kim agrees with that. That it remained pretty evenly. People. We started out 7 days in advance. We worked into the storm, and I'm glad to hear that. But I still am interested in hearing from Kim. Kim, before you joined us, I mean, over 40 deaths is just not sustainable. We've got to, and I think Natalie said it the best, we've got to study this event and study this event and study this event to try to figure out the messaging and that sort of thing. But I appreciate Carl and Elise, the mentioning of the media remaining generally calm, it sounds like, through the event.
You think we're going to come to a point where the media should mention fear? I know it's a slippery slope, but
Yep.
If you've never really experienced true whiteout at sub-zero temperatures, which you can live in Buffalo all your life and not have experienced that, do you really need to be told don't go out? That will kill you.
I wonder, Natalie, if people, for the most part, even think snow can kill you. In a way, sometimes I wonder about that. You think about it, and I think this makes the case very clearly. Now, of course, the wind was one of the driving factors, along with the heavy snow. But I'm just hoping we can look at that either through a service assessment. I know Rick won't probably say much about it, but I have to think Mike Smith's idea about a national review team, much like the NTSB is the FAA. More and more, I kind of look at that, and it's not that the Weather Service can't do it, but it's best to get it out and have some scientists look at it from the outside a little bit. And that's one reason I agree with Mike to some degree. We ought to look at that, but that's down the road, and hopefully a service assessment and research work like Natalie, emergency management wise, and looking at that and things that Kim does in messaging can get us somewhere. But this is just really an interesting event.
It is a really interesting event. And I have a question for you all. I think one of the things that really struck me about the fatalities was all those who were found outside. And you mentioned presumably they were doing X, Y, or Z. I think it's really important that we kind of get a little bit more detail on what they were doing outside. I was looking for, news articles that I could find to get, especially those individuals, because that's where there was so much of the conversation in the meteorological community about, well, the roads weren't shut down soon enough. And you can have things like flow through traffic, people who aren't from the area who were surprised coming into this blizzard, which was fairly localized with the combination of wind and snow that you had. And, so the timing of closure was really kind of important. And so my question is, what do you guys know about the circumstances of the people who were caught outside? I saw at least one story of an older woman who had, it wasn't that she lacked access to a car, she just was leaving to go someplace fairly close to home. And she thought nothing of the weather because it was, she's from Buffalo and she'd lived there her whole life. And she said, oh, I can walk this distance and that. And she was found like 100 feet from her house or something. I mean, it was not far. And who knows if she even could, see to turn back. I mean, the conditions are so disorienting. You get just a little bit down the road and people can find themselves in very unexpected situations. So, we know the circumstances for her because she was with someone who knew what she was doing. And that struck me, as part of this, an issue of experience, can be a bit of a harm. It can be something that works to people's disadvantage in really rare events that we are not very well suited, just psychologically to really firmly grasp it and handle. But sorry, without belaboring the point, would really just like to know if you know more of the circumstances of those individuals.
Well, I've been collecting some articles and I've only come across two. I think you came across one of the same stories. But both people were presumed or had stated they were going to the store. I really hope that we do. I'm trying to collect this data, like how many people were actually stranded? How many cars did they tow, right? So how many people from cars actually did get, and where did they go? Right. And so how many of the 17 were people that were stranded in cars? I don't know. Carl,
I don't think there's a complete information on that because the story is still so new.
Oh, yeah.
But one of the fatalities was a 26-year-old man who leaves behind a wife and an unborn child, who was going to the store for a neighbor, and so that is, it's hard to kind of communicate that because this is the city of good neighbors. People are doing good deeds for other people in dangerous conditions. And again, a lot of us are very familiar with severe weather here, but not this type of event, and so I don't think we have a complete picture on all of the reasons on why people were out. I don't know if we ever will, but again, it just points to so many more questions. And it just seems like it's ripe for research in terms of, psychological attitudes towards snow. I mean, it's a study in persuasion. It's a study in, interpersonal communication, media effects. It's all ripe within the academic field of communication, emergency management, the link between it. I mean, how can we do it better? I think everyone on here is always thinking that. How can we do better? And I'd love to know the answer, right? And I think that there are so many ways to work to get that, but I think, being my impatient self, I don't think it'll be soon enough, because we're now in winter. We're 2 weeks into winter, and I just don't think it comes soon enough, because we want to have this information now to save more lives, and it's just not that easy, right? Because people have attitudes. I mean, this all goes back to psychology as well. We're talking about attitude change. I mean, it's so hard to change people's attitudes about it, right? I mean, it'll take a lifetime for you to change my mind about lake effect snow and moving somewhere else where I deal with, I don't know, tornadoes or hurricanes, right? But it is so difficult to do that type of work when so many of us are trained as scientists and communicators. But that next level down is so much. It's so deep. It just takes so much. I mean, energy and time and effort into getting into not just at that deep level, but even deeper. The depth of this problem and these challenges are enormous.
Yeah, Kim, to your point, I mean, just like all of us are hungry for those answers, the Buffalo community is hungry for answers as well. And I think that might be this storm in particular. People are going to want answers, and there's going to, hopefully, I hope as a meteorologist that we can be in the room when they are debriefing this event and hopefully putting new plans in place that will better help and serve the community in the future. After going through kind of one of my bigger events previously when I was in Jefferson City was the Jefferson City tornado. So after going through that, knowing, there was the event happened, and then going through the process of actually debriefing that storm and learning from it and studying from it, the same thing has to happen here. And it has to happen sooner rather than later, because I hope that we do not see another storm of this magnitude this winter, let alone ever. But who's to, we had November 2.0, and then a month later we have the blizzard of 77 2.0, which that's a whole other story. But the storms of this magnitude, I think we have to better prepare for these. I don't think it's a question of, if, but more so when.
Yeah, well, on that point, I'd love to follow up actually with you, Elise. I was able to listen a little bit while minding my kids. I was able to listen to most of what you guys were saying. And one of the points you made really struck me when you mentioned the weather storm severity index, and that the category of this event matched that former event. But you said, but it's going to be so different. And I would love more of your thoughts then on impacts messaging, because one of the things about this and about most weather events that are impactful is that it's a unique combination of all the things that are happening that generate the scenario upon which that lived, like all of those lives that are making choices, they have to actually make some kinds of decision. So I would love more of your thoughts on, okay, do you think that this is working? And, do you have any other ideas about, should there be maybe additional methods considered to try to dig into impacts messaging?
Yes, Kim, it was difficult. I'm not going to lie. Putting this forecast together beforehand, and as things just looked like they were going to go, they just kept getting worse. The impacts kept getting worse. They kept getting higher. There was more snow coming. The winds were getting stronger with how the system was evolving. So I really tried to take it in simplest terms, where I told people, be where you want to be by Friday and don't move, because this is not something you're going to want to be out in. And even looking back at that, to the point Bill mentioned earlier, was it wrong for me to assume that people can actually feasibly do that? What community was I speaking to? But also, to your point, focusing in on the fact that Western New York is no stranger to lake effect snow, to high wind events, to ice storms. But the fact that communicating it was going to go from bad to worse within a matter of an hour Friday morning, that's what I really tried to key in on, because we knew that if people were going to be out Friday morning, to Natalie's point, that was going to be the domino effect. So thinking ahead to Friday, as we communicated this, I think as early as Sunday, Monday, as a team, as a weather team, we were telling people Friday is the day. That's the day where you need to be in, and here's X, Y, Z, Y. These are life-threatening impacts. And still, I don't have all the answers to that question, to your questions, as we're really still going through this debrief process. But I really hope we do find ways to create new change here in this community so we can better weather the next storm.
That's a really interesting point, that it's not just the category, it's how quick the onset was going to be from 0 to just catastrophic. And that there's something special about that is really important for decisions. So it's not just how bad it's going to get, it's how little time you'll have once it is bad to make any other kind of choice. So the choices have to be made sooner, maybe sooner than you're accustomed to too. And on that point, I Natalie had a really interesting comment in the chat, and it was something I was also wondering about. All those individuals who perished in their homes in the cold. You think about Buffalo, and you think about an area where homes typically are fairly well insulated. You build for winter. It's very different from when we had the big freeze down in Texas. Little over almost 2 years ago. Troy, fond memories. But it's almost been 2 years, and those homes, not at all were they designed to withstand what was going on. But in Buffalo, they are. But Natalie, you kind of make this point. Well, some are. There may be some that aren't, and there are certain populations of people who aren't. Something we talk about with tornadoes is helping people get to just a slightly better shelter. Like, people don't understand how survivable tornadoes are if you're in a site-built home. Even for the worst that occur, almost everyone makes it every time. And this is a messaging thing that we think at the Severe Storms Lab that we're totally missing out on, helping people understand the benefits of just a marginal increase in getting someplace. For winter weather, does anyone who lives in vulnerable housing in Buffalo ever go to another place that maybe could be better if the power goes out? Like, is that something anyone thinks about? Just love your comment on that, Natalie.
Well, that actually is something that you saw. Also, I hope we capture all this data about all the things that did happen, including, and I'm not trying to gloss over any of the tragedy, but including all the things that went right. That, matter of fact, the one of those news articles you might have seen about the gentleman broke into the school and created a pop-up shelter for the people that were stranded in the traffic with him. Later, they were helping people from the houses across the street where they broke in because their power went out. But unlike tornadoes, there's a nasty feature here that you don't need to evacuate until you lose power. But when you lose power means that you've lost visibility. It must be high winds. I mean, that's why that happened. And it's not time to travel, anymore. Some of the housing in Buffalo, yes, it's been remarked that the insulation isn't as good. But I mean, and Carl and Elise, so correct me on this. I think our wind chill though was running down sub-zero, right? Even the most well-insulated home is going to start losing heat, right?
I would say I've never seen wind chill values like that when I was on the air. I mean, it literally and like figuratively, like when you stepped outside, it took your breath away. I mean, the wind chill in Jamestown, New York was minus 33. I mean, I've never seen anything like that. And I think places around here are built and insulated for cold, but not the type of cold that you get in Calgary, Winnipeg, and in Canadian provinces. It just happens so rarely. We prepare for, we get minus 10, minus 15, minus 20 wind chill values, but those are pretty rare. I mean, I have to go back to like 2014 to remember the last time I saw something so widespread, so cold, so like impactful, right? But it was, I mean, it's just, it was so incredibly cold. But yeah, we're prepared for cold, but to Natalie's point, not that type of cold, because that is life-threatening. And when the wind was just unrelenting. And power crews, they can't get up in a bucket truck in that. I mean, anything over 40 miles per hour, and it's a hazard to them. They want the power back as much as anyone else. They want to do that because that's their job. But again, not in those types of conditions.
So you guys make a really interesting point. And Natalie, you kind of mentioned, well, I don't want to make light of the tragedy, but maybe in some ways this is also a success story. I think, I think we need to have a better understanding of, what is our baseline expectation given an event that's this severe. So, I mean, look at all the records that you guys broke with this event. It wasn't just that it was cold and windy and the snow and everything. It was how long it endured. I mean, the duration of this event. And when you have a longer duration event, the impacts are going to start piling up on people. So you might be able to survive that kind of thing for 12 hours, but when it gets to be over 24, you're going to really have a tough time getting through these. There was no break in the conditions. So if you needed to think about fleeing, and when it came to that point, you make a really good point, Natalie, about, you're not thinking about getting to some place because you don't know who's going to be the one who loses power. And I really resonate with that. Like, I have family in Norman, and we live in different parts of Norman with the thought of, oh, well, if a tornado takes out one of our homes, we'll have the other one to back us up. Or if the power gets knocked out on one side, the other side will have something. But you can manage that with severe weather. But when you're in a blizzard and you're not supposed to be leaving, but then people might be, it's a really interesting decision problem. How long is this going to keep going on? I don't have power. I don't have information. I'd love your thoughts, everybody, because you were in this. Is there any part of you that almost feels like, I think we saved a lot of people actually, and given how bad this was, is this almost as good as we can hope to do with, to have people who are aware and mitigating to the best of their ability, and then just have some, at the end of the day, like, just we don't have the power to give everyone the perfect adaptation capacity in that moment, and it's on individuals to kind of do what they can with what they have. And when things are that bad, it's not always going to work. So I just love some thoughts and reflections on that.
I really do think that, the people who consume weather information in this city and in our viewing area, I would like to think that they were as best prepared as they could be, and we always have this conversation about what we do is provide value added that you can't get from your phone, whatever app you use, right? And the value added that we provided as a team, as an organization, and stations across town, there is significant value added in these types of situations where we will tell you that this is a life-threatening situation, or please get where you need to by Friday, because you will not get to your destination. Those are the types of things that I think, are the small victories we'll take, right, among the tragedy. That's as much as I can take away from this in this moment, that we have a huge amount of people in this region that were as prepared as they could be because they were getting good quality information. And like we've been talking about through this entire thing, it can always be done better, but there was a big subsection of people that got it, and they were saying, oh no. Or when we say blizzard warnings, we don't see this very often, or I've never seen anything like this ever, there's that little bit of, I want you to take me seriously when I say that because I've lived here my entire life, or those types of messages. But you don't want to overplay those, right? You don't want to show your best hand always, right? You don't want to just be like, here, look at everything, right? So it's just internal tug of war when you have these times when you really need to just pull out all the stops.
Yeah, Carl, it's that balance of honesty without sensationalizing or adding fear, because that is something that draws people away from local news. But as far as, the weather community here in Buffalo, that was one thing when I moved here, is how well prepared and well versed they are, of course, in winter weather. But, I remember my first snowstorm I covered where we could get a foot of snow. I was so nervous thinking the city was going to be shut down, because when I was in Missouri, 2 inches of snow and the whole city was shut down. So it's having that, being the communicator and realizing, okay, this is what the community is adept to. So when we have an event like this, where you're putting a lake effect snowstorm, a high wind storm, an ice storm, cold in a blender and serving it up over 3 days, how do you communicate that? And I think Carl's approach, our team's approach, is simple terms, impact-based forecast. Yes, you could get a foot of snow. I'm not going to show you a snow map right now, because this is the important information that's going to impact your, of course, holiday weekend plans. Another huge thing that we were fighting with this system was that people were planning and wanting to travel to be with family for the holiday.
I don't want to shift gears too far away from this. This is fascinating, but I did want to kind of just check in on Carl and Elise. Elise, the first time we got to work together was back in 2019. You were at an AMS conference, I think, and you stood up and asked a question during one of our mental health panels, and that resulted in you being on a panel the next year in Boston at the AMS meeting. And your story about your story about how you dealt with the Jefferson City tornado is really fascinating and really powerful. And I appreciate you again for doing that. Just curious about you guys. I mean, this is not just tornadoes that this happens to, this concept of critical incident stress. You guys worked your tail ends off to forecast this, and then the outcome, is not one that any of us would really expect or want. I'm just wondering how you guys are doing processing this. Do you have any resources at your stations that help you get through this? Or at least kind of start with you, because I'm familiar with your story that you've already been through. How does this compare to that tornado experience?
Yes, thank you so much, Rick. And it was great to be part of that as well, and to open this conversation and bring in, the mental health aspect of this. And I will say, in thinking back on this, and this was a question Bill had for Carl and I that he sent us in the prep, this was the first time I ever felt helpless when covering a weather event, because we knew it was going to happen. We knew it could be really, really bad. And then once the event started, there was nothing we could really do. We could say, don't go out. We could say this, but you're fighting storm fatigue. You're fighting a community that might have some storm resiliency. You're thinking, oh, it's just another snowstorm. People are going to be people. But also for me, very fully transparent, I was in Chicago for, the weekend to be with family for the holiday. So that feeling of helplessness kind of kicked into full gear, because there was literally nothing I could do from my vantage point besides, put out the information and amplify the information that Carl was putting out and Patrick Hammer was putting out and our station was putting out, to point people in the direction of where they could get information for this event. So kind of checking in here with the mental health side of things. It's dealing with that, pinpointing the emotion I'm feeling of, the helplessness. And that was helplessness that I felt during this event. And then reflecting on that and moving forward to get to a point where we don't feel that with another event too. I mean, I think it is about really better understanding these events to better prepare all people in all communities for this event. But I do want to spin this to Carl, of course, who was here throughout the event.
I have never been the best to talk about mental health, because I just go. And in those moments, honestly, I just want to shout out our team that was working so hard to get it all done. I was only a very, very tiny cog in that wheel. We had producers, we had directors, our photographers, our reporters, our anchors, our management, our engineering staff that was plowing the station parking lot. They were doing everything they could to get people with whatever setup they needed. In those situations, I mean, from Friday to Sunday, it didn't feel stressful in the weirdest way I can explain it, because you just feel this sense of duty and you just need to get that message out. And I don't care what I was dealing with. I mean, it could have been anything, right? There was this commitment to what we do, and I was going to do it no matter what. And our team was so committed to it, and I mean, you just kind of forgot what day it was at a certain point, I mean, people, if like I had to like watch Sunday Night Football on Christmas to remember it was Sunday, I mean, it was just at that point where, we had just been there with the 12 to 14 hour days, and everyone's there, and, people are missing the holiday with their families. And, it was just one of those things where I don't think anyone really was able to step away and evaluate it until we got to about Monday afternoon. But the team was incredible. I have never seen such incredible work like that, and I'd be remiss if I didn't thank everybody who was doing their best. Patrick and Kevin on our team, just kind of like either locked in or was right there from the moment it happened. Our management, our producers, they just put together such great shows. Our directors had such clean shows. I mean, I'm amazed at what people can do under those incredible circumstances, because it just reminds us how great teamwork really can be in really, really tough situations. So, but I think for us, as we were spending time in the hotels together, the people that were staying there, we were spread out across a bunch of different hotels, but having each other was really great. We spent Christmas Eve, a small group of us just hanging out, and I mean, we were just chatting, we were listening to music. I mean, it was not the way people expected to spend the holiday, but it was a really nice way to spend it with the group of people I had in that hotel, so there were moments of amazement and wonder and just sheer happiness, even though it was a stressful situation. And those are moments that the crew that went through it will definitely always remember those stories, have that bond. It is something that I will always remember.
Yeah,
Well,
and Rick,
Carly.
to your point, I wanted to go back to the fact that once I did get back into the office, I made sure to at least try and go and check in with anybody who worked the event to see how they were doing post. And it might have still been a little too early for them, but in some cases, people were saying like, Elise, please tell me there's no snow in the forecast. Like, I cannot see snow right now. And, maybe you might say that jokingly, but that's also something to seriously take in mind. And for me, as, a coworker to them, be aware too of when there is an event coming or something happening, to have that in the back of my mind, so I can be there for them as well.
Thank y'all. Very good.
And if they're not prepared, it could manifest itself in a really bad way in the next event. And James, back to the big blizzard here, and in '93 or whenever it was, and the social media, back then was non-existent, but you became a clearinghouse for information. And Carl, I imagine there was some of that in terms of social media post and during the event in Buffalo, people reaching out for help, trying to connect resources. It probably was some long period where there just was no way to help. But talk about the role of social media. Did it play a good role in the recovery and response process?
It was such a lifeline to share with people, when we weren't on the air, right? Because of course there was other programming happening. So as we were able to kind of share information, get it out, that's what social media was made for during these types of events. I like to think that in my own weather brain, right? But it was so impactful, and there were so many people that were checking. I mean, people were either watching local TV or checking social media. I mean, for so many people, that's all they were doing. They didn't want to shovel their driveway yet because they knew there was more on the way. So it was a constant flow of people to our website, to our station pages. I mean, people were checking it. And it was so important to have that dialogue with them. People were asking, when is it going to stop? When, and those are things where, I don't want to say we're going to save lives, but maybe people saw it let up and they were like, oh, this might be, but if we're able to quickly have that dialogue with them, right? Who knows, right? I don't ever want to say that that's the thing that saves them. I do not want to say that, right? But, those quick moments of dialogue doesn't take much time from me to reply to them in these types of situations, right? When you can provide that information in a direct channel, right? And not just kind of amplifying the message and hoping people receive it. I have a direct line to them and the Twitter mentions and the Twitter thread that we're going to have, it was really important to have that. And you do your best and when you can in replying to all of those comments and questions. And, but it was so important to have that lifeline too, because getting it out there was just key. It was part of this entire experience.
Yeah, I think that's the positive aspect of social media is that it connects people and you can get information out quickly. And one story in particular, because I know we wanted to bring up some of the stories of resiliency in the city of Good Neighbors, was of Shakira Autry, who saw that man who was trying to go to his job Friday morning at the North Park Theater and was stuck in the snow and was screaming out for help. And she brought him in and posted it to social media to try and get some help for this man who had severely frostbitten fingers and hands and toes. And the power of social media helped get him to a hospital and get him help. So that's just one of course, several stories like that. But yes, Carl, I do think social media did save lives in this instance as well and helps get that critical information out there.
Well, Dr. Spann, I know you probably have some questions that you'd like to ask. Obviously, there's a tragedy tonight in the Bills game that is kind of heartbreaking.
I have stayed so focused, and then you guys are bringing up Bill stuff in the chat.
It's horrific. There's a player who he might have collapsed and died on the field down here. I mean, it is just horrific. They've suspended the game, and again, for those listening, we're doing this on a Monday night, and it's on our channel. It's on ABC, so it's in this monitoring here. And I've never seen them suspend a game like this, and it's really serious. Apparently, he has a pulse, but he's not breathing on his own, and he had a heart attack, a brain aneurysm, or something that happened down here, and it is absolutely horrific. So, it's the last thing Buffalo needs is some other tragedy. But again, the world has just kind of stopped, and they're praying for this player, Damar Hamlin. He played college at Pitt. But anyway, back to the subject at hand here. And I'm a tornado guy. This is fascinating to me because I'm not a snow guy. I think we can all learn from this, and I've learned a lot. But, I had a deal here, goodness, almost 12 years ago where 252 people died on my watch. You guys had 40 people that died on your watch. And in my case, I learned I'm not as good as I think I am. And I told these people, don't you dare do one promo that says we save lives. We didn't save 252. All right. And we've got to focus on that. We've got to do better. We've got to do better. I've got to do better. So, asking all of you, if you could wave a magic wand and go back and do this again, what would you do better the next time?
Oh, wow.
Ooh, I'm getting deathly silence.
I guess it's something I haven't really thought about. I mean, I felt the weight of saying, yeah, I mean, as a professional, right, my job is incomplete. It's the type of weight that, you're sharing. And I remember your talk when you came to speak with us at Mississippi State in 2018. I remember that conversation so vividly, James. And I think, if I could communicate it again, I would tell people, I've grown up here. When I read that AFD, I have never seen anything like that. That sent shivers down my spine. I am concerned. I think I would put more of myself in it, right? Because I think so many times we hear that you want to divorce yourself from this, right? I think I would have gone there because like our conversation has said, we go through this. This is, 1, 2, 3 feet of snow. You get stuck. You have a kit in your car. You shovel out. You get it. You have gloves. You have everything. You're ready. You have a winter preparedness kit. I don't know if there's the type of kit that you are ready for this type of emergency. And I think I would go there. I think that's personally what I would have done because it was everything I thought it would be as I read that. And I screenshotted it. I saved it. I have it on my computer from Wednesday, the 21st. Again, I am so grateful to, so many other people besides, what I do, but our team, but also the team at the National Weather Service in Buffalo. They were rock stars. To put that type of language out, it's the first thing that people say, did you see that? And I shared it with people in my small circle of friends that are not from here. I said, read this because you may never see something like this in your life again, right? And that type of communication, I think, I think I might have explored more had I had more time to process it.
And of the people that died, do we know the demographics, the people groups involved? Do we know anything about that at this point, or is it too early to know?
We know some from briefings by the county executive. I don't know, Carl, at least maybe you have more precise. What I remember was approximately half African American. 20 African American, 18 white, and 1 Hispanic, perhaps. I'm sorry, I'm doing this but it was about that. It's about half and half. So what you actually do see, and this is something that we do need to take a look at, and this isn't about necessarily, because I put in the chat, okay, guys, also, this isn't necessarily just about Buffalo, because this monster could crop up someplace else, right? And what we learn here might save people other places. But I think what we're going to find, we don't have the data yet, but I do think what we're going to find is a disproportionate amount of the distribution of deaths are going to be in the east side of Buffalo, which is the poorer side of Buffalo.
The utilities
Natalie? First. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering, and Natalie, do we know anything about people's ages by any chance? Have we seen anything on the demographics of that?
I haven't seen anything on that yet.
Okay.
I'm hoping somebody's collecting that. They have to be. I haven't seen any comprehensive breakdown like that yet. But I've heard everything from 26 years old to senior citizens. I think what we're going to find out, but I only heard anecdotally, I think we're going to find out is a lot of people who died in their homes were quite elderly. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to do. And it just got colder and colder.
Well, again, this has been a great discussion, and that's a great point. We all can learn from this. Even people in tornado country that deal with different types of weather hazards. There's going to be obviously a lot of work in looking back on this. Kim, do you know of any social science studies that are going to happen up here because of this?
I would not be surprised if some are planned. There's a really fantastic center at the University at SUNY Albany, and this is sort of at least relatively in their backyard for the kinds of disasters they study. I would be shocked if they didn't bring full force to bear on this. It's still a little bit early, for our community in general, but I think it would be really great to see more work on this. And I can't help but think about the operational products that the Weather Service is trying to make. You mentioned some, this paucity, Natalie, of ways of language, of ways of describing, the kinds of threats that are possible. And then, you kind of reflected that point, Elise, when you talked about the winter storm severe, the impact categories that we have, and how that just sort of didn't differentiate enough one kind of event from another. And there's just a lot to be done in this for winter weather. And it is a big killer and it needs to not be overlooked. I know that things like tornadoes, I'm at this National Severe Storms Lab. We do a lot of severe weather, a lot of tornadoes. They're this big, sexy hazard, and it is a tough problem. But winter weather, when something like this happens in a place like Buffalo, I think we have to all sort of sit up and go, man, what are we missing? Because this is a big event to happen in like winter weather capital USA. And it's just as shocking to me on a human level as when we had the El Reno tornado in Oklahoma City, outside of Oklahoma City, and the whole population fled in front of the tornado. And you look at that and you go, in the most tornado-aware, tornado-savvy place in the whole world. And we could have lost hundreds of people very easily if that tornado had stayed on the ground. And, it's just as jarring. And so, yeah, I think a lot of really interesting questions have been raised here. And I think my community, the social science community, really needs to dig into this because there's a lot to learn.
Yeah, Kim,
Awesome.
to your point, James, I remember when I interned with you, you told me that you're never going to forget the first person who dies on your watch.
Yep.
And for me, that was in Jefferson City, Missouri. It was someone who, it was in a winter storm. They lost control of their car and they ran into a snowbank. Then you fast forward to the Jefferson City tornado, where it's a nocturnal high-end EF3 and nobody dies. Granted, there might have been some luck with that. We understand that, but the messaging was so clear and the community was so well prepared. And now we have a major catastrophic winter storm in another community that is prepared generally for winter, snow capital USA here, and we have 40 people. There has to be something to be done. That is something I want to be a part of, have volunteered to be part of with the Buffalo City, the Common Council, have a meteorologist in the room. How can we help better prepare for the next time around? Because it is, if we're not saving lives, then what are we doing?
Absolutely. So again, this has been a really interesting discussion, and thanks to all of you for your input and the job that you did in warning people. And again, and I'll say this, the one thing I've heard over and over, there's a certain group of people, they're not going to take responsibility for anything, and you can't help them. We have to focus on the ones that do want help, and that's most of the people. And you're always going to have some loss of life during these events, but at the same time, we can all learn. But thanks to all of you for the great discussion tonight and the great job. But we must pause. And I've got an odd situation here. So I'm an ABC affiliate, and now we have no Monday Night Football. And they might throw it back to the local affiliates here at the top of the hour. So oddly enough, I'm going to have to roll the segment here from Tony Rice, and we're going to come back and do Picks of the Week. And we'll hold the email when Jen gets back next week. So let's take a pause for Tony Rice, and we'll come back with Picks of the Week and more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Are peaking in the pre-dawn hours of January 4th. With a nearly full moon, your best viewing will be in a brief window after moonset around 5:30 local time until about an hour before sunrise. But there's going to be better opportunities to see meteors and some other cool sights throughout the coming year. The solstice on June 21st brings a pretty cool triangle in the sky formed by the moon, Mars, and Venus. We're also going to have 4 supermoons this year, beginning on July 3rd, followed by August 1st, September 30th, and finally October 29th. The Perseid meteor shower will peak on August 12th to the 13th, and that one's going to be worth going out for, because only a sliver of crescent moon will be visible that evening. On August 23rd, the moon will pass in front of the bright star Antares, creating a lunar occultation, which will be visible from much of the country. This will be particularly cool because it's occurring during the moon's first quarter, and that star is going to disappear behind the unlit half of the moon and reemerge behind the lit half. But the astronomical e-ticket of 2023 is going to be the annular solar eclipse on October 14th. With a path stretching from Oregon through Texas. Along that path, you'll see a ring of fire created because the moon is further away in its orbit from Earth and doesn't completely cover the sun, as it would during a total eclipse when the moon is much closer. Everywhere else, we'll see varying levels of a partial solar eclipse, Consider this a warm-up for 2024's total solar eclipse, which will stretch from Texas to Maine. And if 2017 taught us anything, get your eclipse glasses sooner rather than later. We're also keeping an eye on the normal, very minor Andromeda meteor shower, which peaks on December 2nd. It might experience an outburst of activity as debris from the breakup of its parent, Bella's comet, reaches Earth. The other shower worth circling on your calendar is the Geminids, peaking on December 13th into the 14th. The hours-old moon won't be a factor in this normally very active shower. Next week, we'll have a look at what to look for on launch pads around the world. From maiden flights of new rockets to a robotic exploration of a very juicy target. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me in RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
Calling all weather enthusiasts, join the AMS Weather Band and become part of the American Meteorological Society, whose members have been at the forefront of weather, water, and climate research for over 100 years. You'll get to go behind the scenes with the 10,000 plus scientists, broadcasters, educators, and researchers of the AMS. The AMS Weather Band brings together weather professionals and weather enthusiasts. Band members can grow their knowledge and appreciation of weather and climate by participating in virtual events, online discussions, Q&As, AMAs, webinars, photo contests, and more. AMS Weather Band gives you the opportunity to interact directly with those in the scientific community. Learn more and join the band today at amsweatherband.org.
Speaking of AMS, Bill Murray, when does the AMS annual meeting start? Is that tomorrow or what day? Do we know?
It starts this weekend, and we'll be doing our show live from there Monday night with some of our faithful correspondents who are getting to go.
Good old Denver in January. It's going to be awesome. So anyway, let's do picks of the week. This is where everybody on the show here, and we're going to come to everybody. Just give us something cool that's weather related. This could be a website, book, hardware, software, whatever. And I will say my pick of the week, it is the famous WeatherBrains episode live from the National Weather Center in that basement down there in the auditorium where Chuck and I just really were not being nice to Elise. And I will still apologize to this day, but that is my pick of the week. A WeatherBrains oldie but goodie. Then the whole show was unhinged. So it was pretty funny. Some of that stuff was pretty good. So anyway, and all the picks will be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. All right, Rick Smith, let's go to you in Oklahoma for your pick of the week. Go.
Well, you mentioned AMS, and I know Kim and Neil and I and Troy part of the time are going to be in Denver next week. I'm constantly checking the weather to see what's going to happen. But so my pick of the week is just the main website for the AMS 2023 annual meeting. And from there, you can get to the program. And this is a meeting like no other. There's 30-something sessions going on concurrently. So if you're on Twitter and you want to follow along with the hashtag, it's AMS 2023 or AMS Student 2023. And follow along with all the good stuff there. There's always a ton of live tweeting going on, and looking forward to this will be the first in-person meeting since 2020, I guess. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right, Kim, you got a pick of the week for us?
You know what? Coming off of the holidays and everything, I sadly don't. But you know what? I'm going to find an article. I know I at least deserve the soft bullhorn. I'm going to find an article on the hero of Buffalo, the man who went and saved so many people. I think that deserves to be memorialized. As a link alongside this episode.
Indeed. All right, Troy,
and
what you
you're
got
never
for
that
us?
polite with the foghorn for me. When I get the foghorn, it's like you sound it twice, and it's like 30 decibels louder than Kim's foghorn.
Bill, you get the foghorn before the show even starts.
All right, Troy, go.
Well, I have nothing either, but I did want to, as we start off the show, and actually, Rick, you can go look it up yourself, but let's give a little credit to the Oklahoma Mesonet, because they provide a lot of useful information, and that location near Pryor, Oklahoma tonight, apparently affected by at least a severe thunderstorm. Rick looked it up about 5:40 Central Time, an 81-mile-per-hour gust. Talking to Kevin Clazel up at OU in the Oklahoma Climate Survey, some thought that the instrumentation may have been damaged a little bit there based on the data since then. So interesting, but Oklahoma Mesonet is my pick of the week.
Okay, so let's go to Elise for a pick of the week. I can't wait to hear this one. I bet you it's going to be good.
Yeah, no pressure. I guess kind of my pick of the week would be what you actually tweeted out on your social media site. It's an article that Carl and I contributed to of the timeline of the blizzard of 2022. And to Kim's point, it does include some of the resiliency stories like Merry Christmas, Jay. That's the story of the man who broke into a Cheektowaga school, busted the window. I say broke into, but he busted the window and helped save lives. But that article is a comprehensive timeline of the blizzard from the week out all the way through kind of December 27th, 28th, which also includes the good neighbor stories, as we say, but then also more information about how to help some of those families who have been impacted by loss over the Christmas holiday. So an important article, I would say.
Outstanding. And again, we'll put this up on weatherbrains.com. Carl, give us something good. Go.
It is the story of Shakira and Joey. It's a wonderful story. I'll put the link in the chat here so that you have it. Our wonderful weekend anchor, Claudine Ewing, did a story on this. Shakira has the most wonderful and adorable children that make an appearance at the end of the show, or at the end of the report, rather. And it's just such a beautiful story of the work that Shakira did to save Joey when he was trying to get to work at the North Park Theater. Just worth the few minutes. It is something that warms your heart, especially in these really, really challenging times. I mean, it was just beautifully told, and it's a wonderful family, a wonderful story.
And there are good people in the world. You will learn that after events like this. All right, Natalie, give us something good. Go.
Well, it's not going to be freaking Davis Instruments. I hope those guys aren't like a sponsor of yours, because mine stopped working at night. I do have a pick, but I'm probably showing my absolute amateur status because nobody mentioned Meteostat, and that's normally how I haunt the data in real time. And I'll put it in the chat, but you guys, it's like, that's so boring, but for me it tells it all. I have it set for the 5-day timeline where you see at the Buffalo airports where it's being gathered, where you see between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. on Friday the temperature just go like drop 8 stories, while simultaneously the wind goes wah, like straight up, and all of a sudden we're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah, boy, that chart tells a story. And we'll put the link up on weatherbrains.com for those that are not aware of Meteostat. All right, Bill Murray, go. What you got for us?
Well, I have a Tempest weather story because my Tempest stopped working. And I wrote the company, and they could actually see in the data when it failed, and they sent me a new one, and I went out and replaced it on its little stand, and it's just reporting away so beautifully, and I'm so happy about it. And it was about a month out of its warranty, but they determined that it started to fail prior to it actually going all the way down. So I applaud them for that, which I thought was really, really nice. So anyway,
we're going to send them an invoice for this free ad message.
There you go.
Invoice is on the way. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Well, next week we'll be live from the AMS. Well, my pick of the week is San Francisco just had their second wettest day in history in this atmospheric river event they're in. And I think weather history plays a real important role because we are the keepers of that information. And a lot of times, I'm always reminded of, this could be a black swan event. Well, but there was something generational that happened, and it always seems to be 40 years on period in Alabama. We have some tornado outbreak that is generational, but there are other things that, relate. And of course, the 77 blizzard in Buffalo, you never think you're going to have those kind of fatalities again. We're so much more advanced than we were then, but there are all sorts of new vulnerabilities baked into things. And so I think when I know Rick pointed this out in the chat, what Carl was saying, when you can lean into that weather service messaging and the emergency management messaging and put your own experience in it, I think it carries a lot of import, and I think we'll all be more mindful of doing that.
Okay. And again, so next Monday night, we're live from the AMS with our correspondents that will be there. And that will be an interesting show. And again, kind of an interesting situation here with this football game. I don't know if we're going to do a newscast here in 9 minutes, or if we're going to do a newscast in 4 hours at 2 a.m. It's a horrific situation. So our prayers are certainly for the player that was injured, Damar Hamlin, for the Bills. And again, we understand he's alive. He has a pulse, but he's not breathing on his own. So just a horrible situation there. But again, thanks to all of you. And let's do a quick plug-a-rama here. Elise, plug away, plug your social media, plug something, go.
I am plugging the fact that I am an AMS certified broadcast meteorologist. I am also the lead chair of the AMS Early Career Leadership Academy this year. So for any young aspiring meteorologists who just graduated from their highest degree attained, 1 to 15 years into the industry, you can apply to be part of ECLA this year. But you can find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Elise Smith, WX.
And we are very proud of you. Just know that. All right. So let's see. Carl, what you got? Anything you want to plug? Social media? Anything else? Go.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Carl H. Lamb, Lam, not LAMB. And you could find me there posting content whenever. It just may vary depending on what day you catch me in terms of what geographical region I'm forecasting for. But by and large, it is Western New York. So.
Awesome. Notice Carl's got some of the best audio we've ever had on this show. I mean, that audio is good. That is good stuff.
I work for a radio station across the border, and you got to have your equipment to broadcast from anywhere, like by car. I've done in blanket forts. Got to be ready all the time.
It sounds good. Goodness gracious. All right, Natalie, anything you want to plug? Go.
Oh, no, I am not worthy.
Oh, come on.
I'm just a professor in a business school whose particular passion is
and she is great.
Operations in disorganized environments.
It's so good.
Although yesterday I did become associate dean for a graduate program. So if anybody's interested in an online MBA, there's your plug.
There you go. I knew there was one coming here.
I will endorse it. That program is the best. I'm in it right now.
Awesome. Well, all right. We got to kind of tie this one up here because I got to go see what's happening here in the studio. But here's the situation. We typically record Monday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. And we're going to be on Monday nights for a while. The holiday vacation schedule is ended. If you want to get in touch with us, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. And we'll do a long email segment. I think Jen's going to be back next week, or the next week she's back on the show. But we know that most of you listen. Some of you watch on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/weatherbrains. However you consume the program, we thank you that you do. Thanks for listening. Have a marvelous week, and God bless. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Elise, for making
it a great show. Thanks, everybody.
to Jay Farlow. Yeah.
Outstanding.
Thank you so much.